All right, so let's start in Tshwane, where the DA's Randall Williams has just been elected Tshwane Mayor, and the DA's Katlego Mathebe has been elected Speaker of the city. She was unopposed. Our reporter Govan Whittles, following proceedings in Tshwane, joining us now. So, Govan, it's a clean sweep for the metros. The DA has the mayorship of all three metros in Gauteng. Tell us more about the election of Randall Williams.
Well, that election happened unopposed, Sally. The ANC didn't field any candidates for any of the three positions. All they did was rise to register what they call their dissenting vote, but it was more of just a comment from the ANC's Aaron Maluleka. He's the deputy chairperson of the ANC in the Tshwane region. Didn't seem to take many of the ANC leaders by surprise. The provincial secretary is in the building. We'll be speaking to him shortly. But he has indicated that that has gone according to plan for the ANC. Looks like they always intended not to field a candidate here. And Sally, we must say that we understand at that National Executive Committee meeting this weekend, a report on the state of the structures by Kgalema Motlanthe was scathing and recommends that an overhaul of the Tshwane structures, and that may have been behind the decision not to field Frans Boschilo as mayor. Frans Boschilo being confirmed by the NEC and the NWC as the ANC's mayoral candidate, only for him to be withdrawn. That as it became clear that in this caucus there was some support for Mr. Kgosi Mahepa, the chairperson of the ANC region in Tshwane, but he of course wasn't the candidate. And for a while it looked like there may be a few spoiled ballots with some of the ANC councillors indicating they would have chosen Kgosi Mahepa as mayor, even though Frans was their candidate, but none of that came to pass. Instead, the DA's candidates were elected unopposed. For the position of Speaker, that's Randall Mathebe; for the position of Mayor, returning is Randall Williams; and for the position of Chief Whip is Christo van den Heever. So Christo is just making his speech now. Randall Williams made his a short while ago and indicated that in order for Tshwane to be prosperous, the parties here would have to work together and find a way to cooperate. That's the first indication from senior DA leader in the region that is ready to work with the coalition partners. But of course, whether or not the EFF would have voted for him or what Action SA would have done is now a matter that's come to naught, because none of those votes were required, as there was no one standing against him.
So that's very interesting, in fact. We've heard the Action SA party saying quite clearly after yesterday's surprises in Johannesburg that although there's no formal coalition on the table and that Herman Mashaba feels somewhat betrayed by the spirit in which the DA conducted potential negotiations, that he's done this to keep the people of the cities in mind. What happens now? What has to happen now, Govan, to keep these very fragile balancing acts together and stable?
Well, they'll have to come to some sort of agreement and to indicate how they plan on sharing the votes that they have, which has gotten them over the line and achieved the majority. And even though Randall Williams and the Speaker here, Katlego Mathebe, were elected unopposed, it doesn't mean that they'll hold solid control over the Tshwane Council for the duration of their term, because they're still governing in a coalition government. The only difference here being that the DA much more confident that the parties that it has on side, such as the ACDP, the Freedom Front Plus, and they can count on Action SA, would mean that they could hold on to the municipality. But in other municipalities, they are going to have to keep negotiating on an ad hoc basis before every vote, canvassing for support for every decision to make sure that the budgets pass. And here in Tshwane, we've seen what happens once the caucuses are divided and the coalition partners betray each other. It happened here, and council collapsed collapsed at least 5 times during the previous administration, leading to the city being placed under administration. And of course, the DA saying that this time around it feels much more confident about the partners it has, but that remains on the table, and that remains a threat for as long as the municipality stays hung. And in the absence of a formal coalition agreement between the DA and its partners, it means that they'll have to keep negotiating on an ad hoc basis.
Do you know if there's going to be any fresh attempt to try and get some sort of coalition deal on the table now, or is it simply too late and they're just going to have to continue in this manner, which may end up in some severe deadlocks, particularly I'm thinking around things such as budget?
Yeah, our understanding is that there are attempts to reach some of the leaders of the parties. Sally, I spoke to Herman Mashaba a while ago. He says that he's been looking at his phone and no one's calling him, but he does anticipate a call from the Democratic Alliance. Julius Malema, on the other hand, posting on Twitter that he's busy in Polokwane and he's been ignoring the calls he sees coming through on his cell phone from the other political parties. So there's two conflicting sides, but it does give you an indication that there is still more talking to be done, more negotiating to be done, and that people are still trying to reach those coalition agreements. Herman Mashaba indicating plainly that if the DA fails to come back to them to negotiate a formal agreement and end up installing a minority government with only Democratic Alliance MMCs in the council and taking control of the council, they'll find it very hard to pass another budget. Probably the best indication yet that Action SA does want something out of this deal. It wasn't just free votes that they had given to the Democratic Alliance, and there's an expectation of some positions maybe, but definitely changes in the adjustment budget that would reflect Action SA's manifesto points. So there does appear to be a need to negotiate, but as yet there's no evidence that those fresh negotiations have begun.
All right. Well, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest news from Tshwane there, where Randall Williams has been voted in DA Mayor for a second term, and he was voted in unopposed. Govan Whittles bringing us the very latest from Pretoria there.